Hi. So where I left last time was I had this list of boxes with pointers, and I just thought I should show you what that looks like from a code organization perspective. Okay, so I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. It's a pretty good editor, and let me just close some of these out. Right, so I showed you the game, and then it imports from game interface, which is this one, and it imports from result tracker, which is this one, and it imports the database interface, which is this one. Okay, so that all works together pretty nicely. I thought I'd start with the database interface. Okay, and it's not really a database, it's just storing the information that we're going to collect, which is the scores of a particular player, win, lose or tie, and so that we can come back to the game and keep going with increasing our score rather than having to start from zero again. Okay, so I'm using a file format called Pickle, which is a nice little library available in Python. There are lots of different libraries available in Python. Choose the one you like. I also want to check on errors to see whether my file storage exists or not, and if it doesn't exist, then start from scratch. And to do that, I'm importing the OS library. That's the operating system library. Okay, so here's my database interface class, and it has a constructor. All right, that constructor is always called underscore underscore init underscore underscore, and it always has at least one parameter called self, which is the reference to this instance of this version of database interface. You can have multiple copies of different instances of this class. This class definition, if you like to think about it, is like a cookie cutter, and you can make lots of cookies out of it. And they all refer to each themselves as self. So they don't. So if you've got 10 cookies, you don't have cookie 1 thinking it's really cookie 8. It knows that itself is cookie 1. Okay, and then I've got two functions. The two functions that are usually done with databases. I need to store in the database, and I need to read from the database. And the store function passes in the data to store. And notice, actually I should have mentioned in the second parameter of the constructor, I've got a default parameter. So I only need, when I create a database interface, I don't need any parameters. Self is understood when you're talking about classes in Python, so you don't need to pass in a self. But I could put this database in a different file. I've just decided that without knowing anything else, that I'm going to run in the file rockpaperscissors.pickle, and that's going to be the default value for my file name, and I'm just going to set it like that. So there's the self.filename. Self is, like I said, the instance of cookie 1, if this is cookie 1. And this is the file name associated with cookie 1. It could be a different file name for cookie 8, but it's cookie 1. And then store takes in some data to store, opens up a file, and it's opening it up in binary format because we're going to store this pickle operation, or this pickle library assumes that everything's done in binary rather than in ASCII or text format. So we want to open it up in binary, and then the pickle function is just pickle.dump, and you dump the data to store into the file to use. And then we close the file. That's one way to do it and work with file handles. If you'll notice in the read, there's a slightly different approach. And then in the read, right, we're first of all checking to see if the file name exists. And if it does exist, we're going to load the data from that place. If it doesn't exist, we're going to create a new instance of the data, right? It's a dictionary, it's a data dictionary, and we're going to return data regardless of whether we read it from the file or whether we created a new instance. I said I'm doing something a little different here, right? I'm using with open, so I could do the same thing, similar thing up here. I could use a with statement. The nice thing about doing it this way versus doing it this way is this way you don't have to close the file. Because this file to use only exists at that indent where data is, as soon as we leave that scope, as soon as we leave that part of the program, file to use goes out of scope and will automatically get deleted and automatically get closed. So the way I would do that similarly up here would be, I'd say with open self.filename, filename, WB, right, as file to use, and then pickle.dump data to store, file to use, and then that would be it, right? I wouldn't have to do the close. So both of these things do the same. One's just a little bit more explicit. These days I tend to prefer this way of doing it. As far as you're concerned, either way is appropriate, but the with statement is probably a better way to do it. Now, a lot of people seem to be getting confused about how to test stuff. And I thought I should do an example of how that works, right? So let's have a look at testing the database interface in the next video.